I'm Doug, your tech support representative here at Atlantic British. In this video we're going to talk about a product that we've developed for the Discovery 2. We're finding as these vehicles are getting older, a lot of customers are having problems with the ignition key, mostly getting the key in or out of the ignition switch. So we have found that, and we do carried the original design. We're finding out they're getting harder and harder to come by. So what we have found is a retrofit key barrel for the ignition on a Discovery 2. Now, what you'll be receiving is the barrel itself with a new pair of keys and the breakaway bolts for installing. And this is a relatively easy part to install. There are slight differences in the operation of this unit. The only really difference is, if you're familiar with Discovery 2, before you remove the key you need to push it in and turn and remove. With this you'll never have to do that again. You just bring the key back, pull it out of the barrel. It's a good fit, and you can use your original ignition switch, which will attach right to the back side of this, and we're going to show you actually in a few minutes exactly how to do that. So the big difference is the price. These are considerably less money than the original equipment replacements, and yet it'll still do the job and make life a lot easier for you. And the only thing you'll need to do is, obviously the key is going to be different than what's on your door lock, so you'll need to make sure you keep one key for the ignition and one key for the door lock on your key ring, and that still leaves you a spare key to hide somewhere in case you forget it. So hang in with me, and then I'm going to show you how to install this. Alright, so to begin with, we got to take the shroud off the back of the steering column. At the top you have an adjustment right here for your height. You want to drop that down. That'll give you a little more room to work. The top half just pops right off. You can get your fingers inside, separate both sides like that, and just walk this forward a little bit, and then we'll take that up and out and put that up out of the way. Now the bottom is held on by 3 Phillips screws, those up underneath. And they're not exactly a Phillips. They're called a posi drive. They look like a Phillips, but they have small markings on each corner to let you know that it's a posi drive. You can get them out with a regular Phillips. Just give a little bit of patience. If not, a lot of the screws on these Land Rovers are posi drive. A lot of guys don't know about it. Wouldn't hurt to pick up a number 2 posi drive screwdriver. Alright, so you've also noticed I've lowered the bottom panel that exposes the fuse box, and that's just the 2 plastic screws. You turn 90 degrees and that drops down. You'll see this heavy cable right here. This runs up to the ignition switch, and that all goes into one plug, which you just need to squeeze that tab, give it a wiggle, and just work it slowly out. So the next step is going to be to remove the 2 screws that hold that ignition barrel in place. Now you already see that the top of the screws we have slots cut in it. That's because we've already had this out to make sure that the retrofit was going to work. So these are going to be smooth topped. You're not going to be able to put a wrench on them. You're not going to be able to grab them with a pair of pliers. But they do screw in and out very easily. So what essentially you can do is you can take a small chisel, if you have a straight blade screwdriver you don't particularly like, whatever, just something that you can get a bite on the, and it's going to be on the right hand side of the screw because you want to unscrew it. You're going to simply put a chisel right there, give it a couple taps with a hammer, it's going to work it around. They do come out relatively easy. Once they break loose, you can essentially run them out with your fingers. So we're going to take these 2 screws out, drop the barrel down. There's just a couple electrical connectors we'll show you that you'll need to disconnect, and the barrel will be out in your hand. Alright, so you saw me disconnect this white connector. That's just a squeeze tab. We pull the bulb out of the socket, out of the back of the front shield. And the last thing left is a little solenoid right here. This connector is rather a pain to get out. So essentially you can just take a number 0 Phillips screwdriver and just take the 2 screws out. And what that'll do is remove the solenoid, and you're not going to need it on the replacement unit. So we're just going to essentially take that off, slide that out, and there's basically the barrel for the solenoid. That's just going to lay loose in there, and that's fine. So there you go. We've got it out, and then what we're going to do is we're going to remove the electrical part of the ignition switch. There's a small Phillips here and here. We're going to take those out also with the number 0 screwdriver, and then this is going to be transferred over to your replacement component, and we'll show you how to put it in. At the very beginning, we showed you that the 2 screws that held the original barrel in place had no hex set or anything on it, so you're wondering how you would be able to reinstall it. The bolts that come with this replacement component has the same breakaway bolt. You'll see you have a hex head on top, and then it narrows down to an area that will shear off. And this is basically an anti-theft feature on these, so that somebody can't just jump in with a pair of pliers or a socket and run that out. So what will happen is once we get this in place and we tighten these down, when they reach the proper torque, that hex head will twist and snap right off, leaving a smooth-headed screw in its place. Alright, so we're going to slide this back in, oriented the same way as we took out the old one. We're going to go in basically right through there, and then this harness gets looped and through the back side of the adjusting lever for the column, and then we're going to just slide that up. Now keep an eye on all your wiring. You want to make sure that you don't get a wire pinched in there before you tighten everything up. So set that in place. This is the wiring right here for your turn signals and indicators, so just want to make sure you don't squash anything. And then we'll get up top and we'll start the 2 bolts. The bracket that holds this up in place is already welded to the top of the steering column, so you don't have to worry about that. So we'll get these 2 bolts started and we'll get it tightened down and get it all in place. So just to show you after the installation, all right, 8mm wrench, very easy to get in there. Tighten the hex heads until we reach proper torque, and then it shears it right off flush with the top, basically making these a quote anti-theft screw. And again, this is what the old ones are going to look like when you go to remove the barrel. Then we showed you how to take those off. So just to give you an eyeball on how that is going to look, so you know it's right when you're done. No wires pinched, everything in place. So what you're going to have remaining then in wiring, here's the cable that you switched over and installed from the old onto the new, and that just gets plugged right back into the fuse box. Make sure you hear the click so it's in there nice and tight. Now you're going to end up with the solenoid and the white plug not having anything to plug into on the replacement, and that's okay. Everything remains fully operational. What you might want to do, if you wish, you do have a connector on the replacement unit that feeds the little bulb that lights up the area where you would insert the key. And if you wanted to make that operational, there's a purple and white wire and a solid purple wire. Those are the two that would feed that light. If you want a hard splice off of that connector that goes to the replacement unit to this, and that'll make that light operational. The rest of it, you're just going to take this and tuck it up out of place. We'll fold that up in there. Do the same with the solenoid. You might want to take a wire tie. In fact, we're going to do that. We're going to take a black wire tie, and we're going to basically take this bunch and strap it all together so it's not making any noise while going down the road. Alright, so we're ready to put the shroud back on the column, but before we do, let's put the key in the ignition. Let's make sure everything works properly before we go putting it all back together. Put the key in. This one turns nice and easy. And starts right up. Now you notice I didn't do any programming. You won't have to on these. When you just do it, the changeover, all we're changing is the mechanical part of the ignition switch. The keys don't have a chip in them, so you can use the new keys that come with the new barrel. There's your keys, and as you just saw, vehicle starts right up. I didn't have to do any programming whatsoever. So we're up and running. So we're going to put the shield back on and get the rest of the column put back together. Alright, so remember you got a little lip right here. We want to hook up on that, get around that lip and lift up. We're going to do the bottom one first because that screws into place. So basically get it in fair position. I usually do the back screw first. That's the easiest one to line up. Place it on top of the screwdriver. It's a little bit of juggling, but it'll go. And we get it lined up with the back hole. You may have to make 2 or 3 attempts because it doesn't always line up right the first time. You can get your finger back in there and help aid it up in place. Once you get it, you'll feel it as you turn, the screw will start walking in. Then you know you found the right spot. So we got the back one in. We left it a little bit loose so we can line up the front ones. And essentially going to be the same thing. But once you got the back one in place, the front ones are a little easier to align. Again, we're going to slide that up inside. Kind of put that just where it should be. It should basically line up. And you can tell as you turn this in, you'll see the screw start walking up in the hole. So then you know you're in. So we'll leave that one a little bit loose. Do the other one. Once we get the 3 in, we'll tighten up all 3. And then we'll get the top shroud on. Alright, so at this point now, we're ready to finish up, put the top piece on. But you'll notice when you took this apart, when you took the old barrel out, there's this piece of trim that goes over the end of where the key is. Now this is, as we said, a retrofit, so that this is going to sit a little further into the column as the original did, but the trim will still work. And if you look at the back of it, you'll see that there are 2 locating tabs on each side. One half has got a full, say, bevel to it, or bezel, and the other section has 2 cutaways. The area with the 2 cutaways is going to go on the bottom. Okay, so that's going to go in and slide in, and then these 2 tabs are going to sit up here on the edges. So being we're dealing with basically a plastic piece, we can pull this out a little bit. What we'll do is slide that down in so that that section will sit in the groove that's in that round piece of trim. We'll set that right there, and it does fit around that. And then we'll drop in the top half, get that in position. Check both sides, make sure your tabs are going to line up before you go to put the whole thing together. Okay, that side is done. This side you're going to just very gently pop that together. So it actually looks pretty good. So there's your finished product. You'll now be able to turn your key easier, and it's going to operate better for you, and everything is fully functional on here. So when you're ready to change over, when your key starts sticking on your D2 and you find that you can't get the barrel anymore for that, or that the old one is just much too expensive, You can go with this retrofit item. It works perfectly in this vehicle. Just give a call to any of our knowledgeable salesmen, 1-800-533-2210, and thanks for watching.